Hey everyone, thanks for hanging with us here on Go Local Live. I'm Molly O'Brien. I'd like to introduce you to Alex Zalban. He's the managing editor at TVGuide.com and TV.com. Thanks so much for joining us, Alex.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
So, we're all kind of crying, getting over our love lost for Game of Thrones. We don't want to give out any spoilers, but to get us over the hump of Game of Thrones, we're going to talk today a little bit about fall TV shows to watch. But I guess before we get into that, what's kind of your thoughts on Game of Thrones? Did it kind of just change the way we look at TV shows?
I was very struck by that in last night's episode in particular. I had some mixed feelings about the plot, which we won't get into, don't worry. But there's never been an epic TV show like this before, and there probably have been people who have tried at this point. There have been other shows on Netflix that have tried to reproduce what it's doing. But you saw certain aspects of the show yesterday that were just so big, so huge. It's incredible. So yeah, it's really changed the way the TV has worked, but I don't think anybody really has cracked the formula how to reproduce it exactly. That's something, not to get to TV history, but that's something I feel like happened with Lost over a decade ago,
Yeah.
where there were so many different things that happened and came out of Lost. People tried to reproduce aspects of it, but you never really ended up with the full package the way that Lost did. And that's the same thing with Game of Thrones. It's huge and it's special and it's exciting to be able to watch it live.
So true. And I could talk to you about Lost, but I might cry. I might tear up.
Yeah, me too.
I know, we'll shed tears for Lost. And that's the thing. I mean, what does it take to get into a series like Game of Thrones? Is it for anybody to make magic like that? Does it just take a lot of money?
I think it's more than money. I mean, it certainly helps that you have the novels as material to draw on, so they really have that solid base there, even though, for better or for worse, they've gotten far afield from where the novels potentially will go, since we don't know yet.
Yeah.
So that certainly helps, but then you also have incredible people both behind the scenes and in front of the scenes. One person actually comes to mind. There's a guy named Brian Cogman who started off, I don't remember the exact title, but he was the story supervisor. He was the guy who knew the novels inside and out. So when things would happen in the writing process or on set, he would just say, hey, that's not really accurate to the books, or, oh, that doesn't work there because this thing is going to happen later. And he knew so much about it. He grew and eventually became a writer on the show. And some of the best episodes are the episodes that he wrote. So you have these people that care very deeply about the source material and the material they're putting on TV. And I think ultimately that's what makes it special. The cast cares. The writers care, the directors care. Everybody wants to make the best thing they possibly can.
Wow. And it sure shows. Well, thank you for that. For the people who aren't Game of Thrones fans or don't watch it or whatever else, let's get into some other topics because summer is winding down and and summer TV is winding down, which is thankful for some people, and other people, enjoy the summer season. But we're getting into that fall TV spin, and so that's kind of exciting. So as the fall shows are starting back up, you have talked about a couple of them, and some of them have already started that are worth watching. Talk to me about some of those.
Sure. I mean, one thing that I'll note, actually, I'm terrified of the fall shows coming back. This has been so nice and relaxing, only watching 3 or 4 new TV shows a week. We're going to be back into it, and I'll lose all of my time. But that said, one thing that I did want to mention that came out this past Friday was the new version of The Tick is streaming on Amazon. It's 6 episodes long. It's created by Ben Edlund, who created the comic book several decades ago. There was an animated series that people used to love. Then there was a sitcom version on Fox with Patrick Warburton, which people also loved. And this is the next take on the show. And first of all, it's kind of amazing that this one guy has reinvented the same property so many different times, so many different ways. But this is more serialized. It's still ridiculous. You still have a gigantic blue superhero named the Tick, played by Peter Serafinowicz, who is a parody of over-the-top, ridiculous superheroes. But it's really through the eyes of this guy, Griffin Newman, who is probably one of those guys that you know. He was on Search Party. He's been on a couple of other TV shows. So you probably recognize his face. He plays Arthur, who is ostensibly the Tick's sidekick, but this slightly more serious approach. He was traumatized as a kid when his father got caught in the middle of a superhero supervillain battle, and years later is trying to track down the guy who caused it when he mixes it up with the Tick, this very naive, very earnest superhero. And it's really funny. There's a talking boat. There's a dog who is very religious. There's things that are insane and over the top like that. But at the same time, it has a lot of heart, and it's really about how, as human beings, we tend to be very lonely. Not to get too esoteric about it, but as human beings, we get very lonely, and how we join together and how we form friendships with people. So it's very sweet at the same time. And it's 6 half-hour-long episodes. You can jump right in, binge it, and have a good time.
Yeah, I like those half-hour shows. They're kind of nice to just put on and cruise for a little bit. Another streaming show you said to catch is Narcos on Netflix, which was hugely popular. I haven't gotten into the 2nd season yet, but it's coming back for a 3rd.
Yeah, well, spoiler, Pablo Escobar, who is the ostensible lead of the show, it's really about his story. You probably knew this if you ever read the news, but
if you were existed on Earth.
Yeah, exactly. So they were presented with this weird problem at the end of the 2nd season where the guy that everybody was talking about and the guy that everybody was interested in is dead, but they wanted to continue the show. So instead, they're going to be focusing on the rise of Colombia's Cali cartel. There's some cast members who have left the show, some cast members who are coming back, but it's the opposite of the Tick. It's an hour long on the episodes. It's very intense. It's incredibly well filmed. There's a lot of coordination internationally, which Netflix does so well. So it really feels like it's taking you to this different place and different time. So it's going to be exciting to see what they do without the central performance. But, they got a lot of history to draw on.
No kidding. So those were 2. We started out with Amazon and then went to Netflix. What are some other shows that people might be interested on those streaming networks?
Sure. There's a lot of stuff coming out all the time on both of them. For Amazon, they have a new season of One Mississippi is coming up soon. This is Tig Notaro. She's a hilarious comic, true to life. I don't exactly want to call it a comedy because it's pretty dramatic at the same time. But it's about her going home and how she deals with it. And I think anybody who has ever been home and visited their family after a long period can totally relate to it. On the Netflix end of things, there's a ton of things that have come out. They recently launched Defenders, which is this epic superhero mashup. On the other end of the spectrum, Jason Bateman starred in Ozark, which is a surprisingly dramatic turn for him. And that's about he makes some really bad financial decisions and ends up on the run from the mob and the law. And that's good. It's a little bit more of a slow burn, but it's definitely interesting to watch, and it's really beautiful looking series too. So those are some other things that I think you can check out on streaming platforms. And of course, there's so much. There's almost too much. I tend to download things from both Amazon and Netflix now that I can watch on the train ride into work and the train ride back, that I'm just slowly chipping away at. Like Sense8 is a show that's been on forever. It recently got canceled and then picked up again for conclusion at Netflix. But I just started watching the 1st season of that. And Amazon, same thing. There's just a lot of stuff that you can jump right into. Catastrophe is a great show you should check out. A lot of other things like that.
And it's always so nice that feature that they allow you now to download, which is... Thank you. you can watch without the Wi-Fi, which is thank you. Yeah. I appreciate that. So those are some ones you said for streaming. So let's go to the traditional TV side or the cable side of things, because that's when we really count on the fall. And you said American Horror Story Cult is coming back September 5th and looks... I don't ever really watch that show, but I always know there's a ton of buzz around it. And this season I read a little bio. It looks pretty interesting.
Yeah, one of the nice things about American Horror Story is they have this loose connection between the series. There's always Easter eggs, there's little plot points that are thrown in. Sometimes characters show up from previous seasons. But ultimately, every season is supposed to be its own contained story. It's telling a story from start to finish. And even fans would argue on whether it's a coherent story that tells every season. But at the same time, if you want to just jump right in and watch American Horror Story Cult when it premieres, you should have no problem. You know, Sarah Paulson is in it. She's sort of one of the like repertory players. Also, Evan Peters is a fan favorite, and he's back. There's some new folks that are coming in, like Lena Dunham and Billy Eichner, and Billy Lord will be on this episode, and Colton Haynes. But they're all playing new characters. So this one, the thing that's really interesting, that's going to be kind of fascinating to see how they play this out, it kicks off on election night 2016 and deals with how Sarah Paulson's characters and Evan Peters' characters in particular react to the aftermath of the election. Sarah Paulson, as far as we can tell from the trailers, is dealing with a little bit of PTSD off of the election and starts to hook into one of her main fears, which is clowns. And we don't know much more than that, but we do know it seems like there's some sort of clown cult that's chasing her around.
Oh, that is terrifying.
Yeah. I say this as a guy who actually married a professional circus clown, which is totally true. Clown cults are still scary and terrifying. So there you go. But if you do want to bone up at all, if you are interested in that, Netflix has a couple of the seasons of American Horror Story, and it looks like this one ties in at least a little bit with one of the past seasons, Freak Show, which focused on, a murderous clown. So some of those themes come back and some of those characters come back this season. If you want an easy jump in, you don't want to have to watch all of the previous seasons, just check out that one.
Oh my goodness, yeah, I'm not a big scary fan, so but I also read, is Emma Watson going to be in this season at all as well? So you have Lena Dunham, which is cool, and then a lot of guest stars too. So they always do a good job. Wasn't one year Lady Gaga was in it? So they always do a good job bringing stars in.
Yeah, it's definitely like people tend to surprise. People tend to surprise, show up, or come back. So it's always fun to see those people and fun to see who you can spot and which faces. And I will say, from having watched some previous stuff, there are some scary parts, but for the most part, I found it at least very goofy, over-the-top scary.
Yeah.
Like, there's some crazy, terrifying things that occasionally happen. They're good at the jump scares, but ultimately, it's more interested in parody and saying something about society than it is legitimately being a horror TV show.
Then really scary. Just a couple minutes left here. We've talked a little bit about the cable stuff and about the streaming services. Do you have any top picks, or is there anything worthy on the regular channels like ABC, NBC, CBS, Fox, CW?
Sure.
Anything that you think, couple top picks from those channels?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, listen, starting, next week after Labor Day, there's a couple of things coming back, but then after that, the TV season comes back in earnest. There's a ton of new things that are going to be on TV. A couple of things that I'll mention coming a little later down the road. CBS has a show called Me, Myself, and I that I think is really kind of fascinating. It's a comedy, but it focuses on the same guy at 3 different times in his life. So the young kid is new. And then there's Bobby Moynihan when he's in his 30s and 40s and he hasn't really figured life out. And then the older version is played by John Larroquette. And that's when he's a rich billionaire, Google type or Steve Jobs type. But he still hasn't really figured stuff out. So it's a lot of funny, has a lot of heart, and it's really refreshing and different. Another one that I'm really looking forward to, I don't know if you watched Dynasty back in the day, but CW is bringing back Dynasty.
They're bringing it back.
They're bringing it back. Josh Schwartz, who did the OC and Gossip Girl, is running it, as well as Stephanie Savage.
Oh, nice.
It is bananas, over the top, everything you could want from a Dynasty reinvention. So that's pretty great. And then there's a lot of returning shows too. You have The Good Place is coming back. That was one of my favorite comedies of last year.
Loved it.
If you haven't watched that, definitely stream that on Netflix. It has a great twist that is too good to spoil. One of the best twists that I've seen on TV in years. Or this isn't exactly returning. It's kind of new, kind of returning. But Star Trek Discovery is going on CBS and CBS All Access. That's the first time the franchise has been on in, I think, over a decade and a half or so. Sonequa Martin Green from The Walking Dead is starring on it. Jason Isaacs, who you might recognize from the Harry Potter series, is one of the captains. Michelle Yeoh, one of the biggest international movie stars, is on it as well. And it looks like a total reinvention of the Star Trek franchise. I'm very excited to see what they do with that.
Cool. That should be pretty exciting then. I know a lot of Star
Yeah.
Trek fans out there are probably looking forward to that and probably going to gain a lot of new followers as well. Alex Zalban from TVGuide.com. Thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it, and we'll probably get you back here on not too far away to get insight on the latest TV. So thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate it and wish you the best. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me on. Have a great
Appreciate
day.
it. Well,